Following the major British victories at Charleston and Savannah, by the spring of 1780, the Continental Army has been almost entirely defeated in the South. While Congress reels from the defeat and prepares a response, the only thing now standing between Britain and the complete recapture of the southern colonies is localized resistance and hastily organized militias. What will follow is an unconventional and brutal war of ambushes, skirmishes and raids, where ingenuity and perseverance become crucial to victory. By May 1780, British influence is rapidly spreading in the South. Hundreds of local representatives, including former Patriot governors, assembly presidents, and prominent citizens, congratulate General Clinton on his recent successes and offer their support. The British strategy appears to be working, matching military supremacy with the enticing offer of a new imperial relationship that grants most of the colonial demands from the start of the war, including self-governance within the empire. The British also attempt reconciliation by paroling prisoners and offering pardons to active rebels. The conditions are generally lenient and require men not to rejoin the fight against the British. There is growing apathy for the war in the South, and with rumors circulating that Congress is ready to cede the Carolinas and Georgia to Britain in exchange for peace, many now become disillusioned and accept the offer to go home. Meanwhile, General Clinton has received intelligence that the French may strike against New York, and in June he prepares to sail north. But Clinton is taking the majority of British regulars, cavalry, and heavy equipment with him. General Cornwallis is to be left in charge with 3,000 regulars and 3,000 American provincials and militiamen. With such a small force, Cornwallis has a daunting task ahead of him. His instructions are to pacify South Carolina and Georgia before driving into North Carolina and eventually Virginia. Clinton and Cornwallis are still deeply divided, marked by frequent miscommunication and strategic disagreements. This is epitomized before Clinton's departure, when he issues a new proclamation without consulting Cornwallis or other senior officers. All Americans that have recently been released on parole are now required to take fresh oaths of allegiance and to actively support the British, which in practice likely means joining a loyalist militia. Those who refuse are to be once again treated as rebels and face arrest or worse. Cornwallis and other British commanders are left baffled and furious once they hear about Clinton's decision. Cornwallis believes that the war can be won by relying on the growing neutrality of Americans and by not forcing them to pick a side. But Clinton's new proclamation effectively requires Americans who would have previously honoured their paroles and sat out the war to now join the British cause. This was something many Americans would bitterly resist and would now thrust many of them back into active opposition. What's left of the Continental Army in the South has been retreating following the defeat at Charlestown. By the end of May, they abandon Camden, and Colonel Buford leads some 400 men towards North Carolina to regroup with other forces. But Cornwallis is well informed by locals of the Continental movements, and Lieutenant Colonel Banastre Tarleton and his loyalist dragoons of the British Legion have been sent in pursuit. 15 miles outside of Camden, the British finally catch up to Buford in the Waxhaw region. Tarleton is outnumbered more than 2-1 with just 150 horsemen. But after covering over 100 miles in just 2.5 days, the Loyalists are determined to meet the retreating Continentals. Events of the battle are long disputed, but by 3 p.m. on the 29th of May, the Loyalist vanguard reaches the Continental rear, and Buford forms up his men for battle. Tarleton's force is split into 3 divisions, and with the sound of cavalry bugles, they advance forward. Momentum builds, and at 300 yards from the Continental line, the charge begins. The Dragoons start at a canter and progress to a full gallop 150 yards from the Continental lines. The cavalry can cover the entire distance in under 45 seconds, giving the Continentals enough time for just one effective shot. Buford waits until the last moment until he orders to fire, and with the volley, Tarleton's horse is shot from under him along with a number of his men. But it is not enough to stop the Loyalist charge, who now, believing their commander killed, press home the attack. With the terrifying speed of the cavalry assault, it is likely that Buford now attempts to surrender by sending out a white flag. But in the chaos of battle, and with Tarleton trapped under his horse, the white flag is either not seen or purposefully ignored. In either case, the Continental lines soon break, and for 15 minutes, the Dragoons hack a bloody path through their countrymen. By the time Tarleton has found a fresh mount and regained control of his men, 250 Continentals lay dead or badly wounded. Another 50 would soon be captured and then paroled after the battle. The victory appearingly further secures British control in South Carolina, removing one of the last major Continental forces in the area. But news of the battle is spreading, and reports and rumours tell of a bloody slaughter where the British gave no quarter to surrendering troops. Word of a massacre sends shockwaves through the South, and combined with Clinton's recent proclamation, almost overnight, volunteer militias start to silently mobilise across the backcountry. As spring turns to summer in 1780, Cornwallis begins re-establishing British administration in the South. He believes the key to this is control of the countryside, but to pacify the territory, he desperately needs more men. A Scottish officer, Major Patrick Ferguson, is appointed to recruit and lead new Loyalist militias. 8 fresh battalions are quickly raised, and the skirmishing with Patriot forces begins in earnest. In Lincoln County, North Carolina, despite being ordered not to muster until the arrival of British troops, in June 1,300 Loyalists, confident the war is turning in their favour, gather to march south. But much like at Kettle Creek a year earlier, they are smashed in a surprise attack at the Battle of Ramsar's Mill by a much smaller Patriot force, quickly evaporating support for the Crown in the area. This action is repeated again and again through the summer of 1780, where the Patriots, often outnumbered, destroy a number of Loyalist militias in a brutal civil conflict between neighbours and friends. Although many of the battles will go unrecorded, across the region, Loyalist camps are assaulted, patrols and dispatch riders are ambushed, and supply trains are seized. The Patriot forces are often uncoordinated and lack the professionalism of an army, but this is also what makes them effective. Francis Marion, who would become known as the Swamp Fox, epitomizes this spirit. Marion's force is one of many small bands of men using their knowledge of the swamps and backcountry to strike swiftly before disappearing into the wilderness, frustrating larger and better equipped Loyalist forces. The Patriots target British supply lines and outposts, while the Loyalists, organised by Ferguson, attempt to fight conventional battles and conduct punitive raids against Patriot communities. But the increasing number of Patriot victories is creating a groundswell of local support in many areas, providing critical intelligence, supplies, and safe havens for the partisans. Cornwallis and the British command move from optimism in June to despair by August. Although Cornwallis maintains uneasy control over much of the territory, his logistics are seriously hampered, while both the credibility of British authority and local support for the Crown slowly deteriorates. Cornwallis writes to Clinton that there is now an absolute state of rebellion in the South. Like his predecessors had found in the North, Cornwallis is fast learning that capturing key urban centres is one thing, but but controlling the vast, hostile countryside is quite another. By early August, after a grueling summer, the British finally receive intelligence that a continental army is moving south. The news is welcomed by Cornwallis. The war is, at long last, returning to the type of conventional fighting he is all too well accustomed to. Following the defeat at Charlestown in March, Congress had appointed General Horatio Gates as the new commander in the South. After the stunning victory at Saratoga in '77, which Gates received the credit for, he was an obvious choice for Congress, although not the preference of Washington, who had recommended Nathanael Greene for the role. Gates, a former British Army officer, is an ambitious and confident general. He arrives to take command in late July, dubbing his men the Grand Army of the Southern Department. But Gates has a disorganized and poorly supplied force, largely composed of militia and a corps of 1,400 Delaware and Maryland hardened veterans. Gates is informed that the British are scattered and tied down across the South, and that Cornwallis has not yet moved from Charlestown. His senior officers advise patience to build up their forces, supplies, and an intelligence network in the region. But Gates sees an opportunity. Although a risk, a swift victory against a vulnerable British garrison at Camden could build morale in his army and perhaps even persuade the British to fully withdraw to Charlestown. After just 2 days in command, Gates decides to roll the dice, and he orders his men on the road to Camden. Not wanting to waste time, he advances on the most direct route south through barren swamps and mostly Loyalist areas. This means he is unable to rendezvous with other nearby friendly formations, while desertions and sickness take their toll. But it does allow for a relatively swift advance, and the Continentals arrive close to Camden by mid-August. Gates has calculated that his army is 7,000 strong, and he plans to surround and destroy the small British garrison in a surprise assault. He orders a final night march to Camden on the 15th, but his senior officers remain deeply skeptical, prompting a count of the troops. The tally reveals only 3,000 to 4,000 men are fit for duty, but when this is reported to Gates, he remains confident and the advance continues. As the army marches towards Camden, at 2 a.m, fighting is unexpectedly heard at the front of the column. An unknown cavalry force has ridden directly into the Continental vanguard, and a confused melee ensues. Prisoners are captured and immediately brought to Gates. The unknown cavalry force turns out to be none other than Tarleton's British Legion, and Gates quickly learns, to his horror, that he faces Cornwallis on the march with 2,000 troops. 1 week earlier, Cornwallis had been informed by spies that the Continentals were advancing to Camden, and he quickly moved to reinforce it from Charlestown. Cornwallis is also rolling the dice. His intelligence suggests the Continentals number 6,000 men, and if his army is defeated, Camden would soon fall, along with the 800 sick and wounded he has resting in the town. Such a defeat would almost certainly lead to a full British withdrawal back to Charlestown, undoing the past year's progress and the entire Southern strategy. By a complete coincidence, both armies had started night marches on the same road, and both were now locked in for a decisive battle the next day. As dawn breaks on a hot and humid August morning, both armies are deployed on the field with 300 yards between them. Both Gates and Cornwallis have arrayed their forces following British military doctrine of the day, their stronger regulars on the right flank and their weaker militias on the left. As cannons open fire, the opening moves begin on the Patriot left. Both sides observe the other maneuvering on the flank, and in an attempt to take advantage, mutually order advances. The Virginian militia, some 800 strong and 2 to 3 ranks deep, advance in loose lines, with officers shouting encouragement to their men. British commanders often seek to close the distance quickly to allow for shock bayonet charges, and at Camden, it was no different. The regulars are shoulder to shoulder and using a well-drilled advance and fire tactic, firing a volley, stepping forward while reloading, and then shouting huzzah before firing once more. The lead musket balls are an ounce in weight and deliver horrific damage, the impact often knocking men to the ground. To the untrained militia, the sight of the advancing British line and their 18-inch bayonets is terrifying. The Virginians reply with 1 or 2 frantic volleys, but as the prospect of a charge looms closer, one man drops his musket and runs. Panic has now gripped the Virginians, and soon a second, a third, and then a dozen more start running from the front. Fear can be infectious during a battle, and almost instantaneously, the entirety of the Virginian militia, officers and men alike, turn and flee for their lives. To make matters worse, the sight of the retreating Virginians is causing a ripple effect. The panic has become a contagion, and the 2,000-strong North Carolinian militia, who have yet to fully engage the British, now join in the rout, running headfirst into the Continental reserves. Gates, upon seeing his left disintegrate, now believes the battle is lost, and he flees at full gallop and without stopping to give further orders to the town of Charlotte, 65 miles north. But the battle is not over. The disciplined Continentals on the right are still in the fight and appear completely unfazed by the retreating militia. The veterans are opposed by Loyalist North Carolinian and Irish militias, along with provincial regiments. The 2nd Maryland Brigade and Delaware regiments throw back several charges, before themselves counterattacking and taking a number of prisoners in the process. For at least half an hour, Cornwallis is barely able to keep his own left flank from collapsing, and he personally rides up and down the line, shouting encouragement while under fire to steady his men. The British regulars on the right have resisted the temptation to chase the fleeing militias and are now reformed and wheeling around to attack the Continental flank. The 1st Maryland Brigade in reserve has moved forward to cover the left as best they can, but they are heavily outnumbered, and despite their bravery, they are being forced to give ground. A grizzled veteran commander, Major General DeKalb, is in charge of the Continental right. His horse has been shot from under him, but with his sword in hand, he's able to lead a number of counterattacks to hold back the encircling British, personally cutting down a number of enemy soldiers in the process. The fighting continues for an hour in a brutal slugging match, with smoke covering the field, reducing visibility for both sides. In confused fighting, DeKalb leads a charge forward. In the fray, he receives his 11th bayonet or musket blow of the day, and finally falls, mortally wounded. The Delaware Regiment has stood its ground bravely, but in the process, 2/3 of the regiment are becoming casualties. With the Continental cavalry and militia in full retreat and what's left of the army surrounded, Cornwallis now plays his trump card. The smoke has been screening British dragoons, who are now freely roaming the field. Tarleton's British Legion are ordered to charge into what's left of the Continentals, and with this fresh assault to the rear, the Maryland and Delaware lines are finally broken. Unlike General Howe before him, Cornwallis now orders a pursuit, and the British cavalry harry the retreating Continentals for some 22 miles. By the evening, both the battlefield and roads north are strewn with casualties. The Continentals have suffered at least 900 dead and wounded, and another 1,000 captured in a decisive defeat. The British have taken over 300 casualties, which, although much lower, still represents 15% of the army. And with no sign of reinforcements, Cornwallis is acutely aware that these men will be difficult to replace. After the battle, Gates makes little effort to regroup his army. That includes warning a militia force under Thomas Sumter of the defeat, who had been successfully harassing supply lines in the British rear. At Fishing Creek, Tarleton and his British legion catch up to Sumter's force and in short order kill or capture another 450 men. Gates's short-lived campaign has turned into a debacle and the second major continental defeat in the South after Charlestown. Gates, being an ex-British Army officer of 24 years, had knowingly pitched his militia against the best British troops on the field, revealing either a grave misjudgment or severe negligence. Despite the victory, the British are unable to capitalise in the following weeks, and they are again plagued by yet further Loyalist defeats. Despite controlling the major towns in South Carolina, the countryside still remains deeply contested. For Gates, he will be dismissed in October and finally replaced in December. To further his own ambitions, Gates had often advocated for rival officers to be court-martialed, including Benedict Arnold after the Battle of Saratoga in an attempt to undermine his reputation. But now that he was in the firing line, Gates would vehemently oppose a brewing inquiry. Many of his contemporaries were appalled by Gates's actions, including Washington himself, and although Gates would survive the eventual court-martial, he would never again command an army in the field. Despite Cornwallis's ongoing problems with partisans, with the Continentals vanquished once more, he now plans a major push into North Carolina for the following spring. He gathers his army and moves to Charlotte, where he hopes to establish a base for recruiting Loyalists, resupplying his forces, and preparing for next year's campaign. Major Ferguson, leading Loyalist forces in the South, personally commands a force of over 1,000 men. Ferguson is a bold and charismatic officer and perhaps the best marksman in the British Army, even having invented his own rifle. But he is also deeply conventional in his tactics and approach to warfare. At the Battle of Brandywine years earlier, he had refused to shoot George Washington despite having a clear shot because the idea of shooting an unsuspecting officer had disgusted him. Ferguson and his Loyalist militia had been making good progress on the border of North and South Carolina, and by the end of the summer, virtually all Patriot forces had been dispersed in the area. In September, they moved 70 miles west of Cornwallis to start recruiting in North Carolina and protect the British left. While there, Ferguson releases a prisoner on parole with a warning message to local patriots. He threatens to hang their leadership and lay waste to the countryside unless they submit to British rule. The message is taken as a direct challenge, and within weeks, 900 Patriot horsemen, the Over-Mountain men, are rallied and on their way to answer it. Ferguson is aware of the Patriot force, but he only slowly moves towards Cornwallis in Charlotte, perhaps underestimating his opponents, or more likely, because he is hopeful for a battle. The Patriots, happy to oblige, are kept informed of the Loyalist position by locals and begin to close the distance. Ferguson and his men are just one day's march away from Charlotte, but instead of moving east and to safety, they pause and camp on top of Kings Mountain. Kings Mountain is a large hill rising some 60 feet, with a mostly flat and open top, 600 yards long. Some Loyalists, including Ferguson, are on the high ground to the south, while the majority of the men are camped on flatter ground to the east. Ferguson has posted pickets around the hill, but he has made no effort to fortify the encampment. The Loyalists are made up of 1,000 Georgian and Carolinian militiamen and 100 provincials from New York wearing scarlet uniforms. As the day passes on October 7th, the men clean their weapons and rest in the camp as light rain drizzles around them. The Patriot militia, made up of frontiersmen from the Carolinas and Virginia, arrive in the area and stumble upon a recently paroled prisoner. Hearing the state and disposition of the Loyalists, they tie up their horses and move to surround the hill. At 3 p.m. on the north side, the frontiersmen start the battle by yelling out a fierce Indian war cry. Some of the Loyalist pickets had been silently killed before they could raise the alarm, leaving Ferguson's men shocked to hear the enemy so close. Drums roll, and the Loyalists quickly scramble to form battle lines in the clearing around the camp. But they are not on an open field like at Camden, or facing a drawn-up, professional opponent. The mountainside is thick with foliage and trees in all directions, covering the Patriot approach, who first start reaching the high ground on the southern side. All around King's Mountain, there is soon an eruption of fire, smoke, and cries of battle. The Loyalist ranks volley fire and then charge with bayonets, running through any Patriots that hold their ground. But most of the Patriots move quickly around their enemy and rally near the bottom, stopping any pursuing Loyalists dead in their tracks with fierce rifle fire. On the north side, the Patriots use the natural cover to fire into the Loyalist lines. The Loyalists are easy targets, and their returning volley fire is of little use against the frontiersmen moving behind trees. Gaps are beginning to show, and some Patriot units sporadically break into the camp in bloody hand-to-hand fighting. The Loyalists on the high ground, now surrounded, fall back to the main camp, where many of their comrades are starting to fall out of formation and instead fire behind wagons, tents, and any cover they can find. They have some success in counter-attacking with bayonets, driving the Patriots back at least 3 times, and almost routing some groups who are cut down or fall off cliffs trying to escape. But as soon as the Loyalists move back up the hill, they are followed and picked off one by one. Soon the Loyalist ranks start to thin and morale plummets. Ferguson, although already wounded, is continuously riding between his men on a white horse and coolly issuing orders. As the situation continues to rapidly deteriorate, he orders his cavalry to mount for an attack. But no sooner than saddling their horses, the men are shot down by accurate rifle fire from the tree lines. The Loyalists are being overwhelmed, and a white flag is raised, only for Ferguson to ride over and tear it down. A second white flag is raised and torn down once more. Ferguson's men have taken heavy losses and now implore him to surrender. But he refuses and instead rallies what men he can and attempts to break out with a charge. As they push through the Patriot lines on horseback, cutting and slashing with their swords, they are, in short order, shot down to the man. Ferguson receives 7 rifle balls to his body, with a great many more holes in his hat and clothing. His body will soon be stripped, and by some accounts, even urinated on. Loyalist bodies are now lying in heaps from near point-blank fire, and a soldier is sent out with a white flag, asking to surrender. He is promptly shot, and despite pleas for quarter, the firing does not stop for some time, with many seeking revenge for Tarleton's actions at Waxhaw. The firing eventually dies down, but a Loyalist foraging party returns and the fighting briefly resumes. The Patriots are fearful of British reinforcements and that their new prisoners will escape. In the brief final action, up to 100 more Loyalists are killed, some by summary execution. Roughly 300 Loyalists have been killed in the immediate fighting, but another 150 would soon perish, as the wounded are left to their fates on the mountainside. Almost 700 Loyalist prisoners are force-marched away, and a number would soon be hanged for various charges, including recently switching sides. The battle had been brutal and epitomised the war's Old World tactics against New World individualism. On an open field like Camden, the British reigned supreme, but King's Mountain and the summer of Loyalist defeats had proven that to be victorious in America, conventional tactics and military might was not enough. Ferguson, despite his brilliance, had made a catalogue of errors, and as a result, By the end of 1780, the Loyalists in the backcountry are now an almost spent military force. For the Patriot cause, news of the battle reverses the prevailing sense of defeat in the South. The victory is exactly what is needed, and militia and Continental ranks soon start to swell. General Cornwallis takes the news badly in Charlotte. Loyalist activity falls to an all-time low, and the countryside soon becomes more dangerous than ever. British foraging parties must now only move in strength, while any lone couriers are dead men riding. With fever sweeping through the army, a move into North Carolina is for now impossible. Left with little choice, on the 14th of October, Cornwallis retreats south to Winnsboro for the winter. For the main Continental Army in the South, still licking its wounds after Camden, some good news is potentially on the way. With Washington's full support, the pragmatic and resourceful Nathanael Greene takes command in early December, and he has plans for a new strategy against the British for the following year in 1781. Thank you for watching our series on the American Revolution, and of course, a huge thanks as well to our Patreon and YouTube supporters. Join now to get early access and vote on future videos. Thanks again, and until next time.